The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect, but the heavy, suffocating kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath feel like a crime. 37 days. That is how long the trial had lasted. 37 days of testimonies, evidence, tears, and accusations. And now, finally, it was ending. Sarah Mitchell sat in the defendant's chair, her hands folded on the table in front of her. They were trembling. She tried to stop them, pressing her palms together harder, but it only made the shaking worse. Her attorney, David Rosen, sat beside her, his face unreadable. He had been practicing law for 22 years, and he had told her once that he could always tell when a jury was going to convict. Always. But when she asked him what he thought this time, he just squeezed her shoulder and said nothing. The jury had been deliberating for 4 days. 4 days of sitting in a cell, staring at gray walls, wondering if she would ever see the outside world again. 4 days of replaying every moment of the trial in her mind, dissecting every word she had said, every expression on the jurors' faces. For days of hope and terror wrestling inside her chest until she could not tell them apart anymore. Judge Patricia Holloway sat at the bench, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the paperwork in front of her. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a face that had seen too many tragedies to be shocked by anything anymore. She had presided over hundreds of trials, but this one had gotten under her skin. The victim had been only 19 years old, a college student, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and now she was dead, and someone had to pay for it. The bailiff stood near the door, his hand resting on his belt, eyes scanning the room. The gallery was packed. Reporters sat in the front rows, their pens poised over notebooks. Cameras banned from the courtroom, but their words would paint the picture instead. Behind them sat the victim's family. The mother, Emma Chen, wore all black, her face hollow and haunted. The father, Michael Chen, sat rigid beside her, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. The younger sister, Emily, was only 16, her eyes red and swollen from crying. And then there were Sarah's supporters. Her mother, Linda Mitchell, sat in the back corner, her hands clutching a tissue that had been shredded into pieces. Her brother, Marcus, sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. A few friends had come, but most had stopped returning her calls after the arrest. That was how it worked. Innocent until proven guilty was what they said, but everyone had already made up their minds. Sarah looked at the jury box. 12 faces, 12 strangers who held her entire life in their hands. She had studied them during the trial, given them nicknames in her head. There was the librarian, a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes, who always smiled at her. The construction worker, a broad-shouldered man who never showed any emotion. The teacher, a young woman who took notes constantly. The retiree, an old man who sometimes dozed off during testimony. 12 people who knew nothing about her except what they had been told in this room. Judge Holloway cleared her throat. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. He was a middle-aged man in a gray suit, an accountant, Sarah thought. He had been the one who asked the most questions during jury selection. He held a piece of paper in his hand, and Sarah watched as it trembled slightly. Even he was nervous. "We have, Your Honor." The bailiff walked over and took the paper, carried it to the judge. Judge Holloway unfolded it, read it silently, her face betraying nothing. She folded it again and handed it back to the bailiff. "Will the defendant please rise?" Sarah stood. Her legs felt like water. David stood beside her, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. She could feel every eye in the courtroom on her. She could hear her mother crying softly in the back. She could feel her heart hammering so hard she thought it might explode. Judge Holloway looked at the foreman. "Please read the verdict." The foreman unfolded the paper again. He looked at Sarah, just for a moment, and in that moment, she thought she saw something. Pity? Regret? She could not tell. In the matter of the state versus Sarah Mitchell, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we the jury find the defendant. Sarah felt it then. A strange sensation, like something inside her chest, was twisting. She tried to take a breath, but could not. The room started to spin. She reached for the table, but her hand would not move. David was saying something, but his voice sounded far away, like he was underwater. Her vision blurred. The faces in the courtroom melted together into a swirl of colors. She tried to say something, tried to call out, but no sound came. Her knees buckled. She collapsed. The courtroom erupted into chaos. David caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her down gently. The judge was shouting something. The bailiff was running toward them. People were screaming. Her mother was screaming. Da-da-da! Someone was calling for a doctor, but Sarah heard none of it. The world had gone silent. In dark, 3 months earlier, Sarah Mitchell was not supposed to be a suspect. She was supposed to be a witness, a friend, someone who could help the police figure out what had happened to Emma Chen. Emma had been Sarah's roommate at Harrington University, a small liberal arts college in upstate New York. They had met during freshman orientation, two nervous 18-year-olds from different worlds who somehow clicked. Emma was studying pre-med, the daughter of 2 doctors who had immigrated from Taiwan before she was born. Sarah was studying journalism, the daughter of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to pay for tuition. They should not have been friends, not by any logical measure, but they were. Best friends. Yes. They shared an apartment off campus during their sophomore year. A cramped 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old building with radiators that clanged at night, and a landlord who never fixed anything, but it was theirs. They painted the walls, hung posters, cooked terrible dinners together, and stayed up too late talking about everything and nothing. Emma was the kind of person everyone loved. She was kind, brilliant, funny, always ready to help anyone who needed it. She volunteered at the free clinic downtown, tutored high school students in science, and still managed to maintain a 4.0 grade point average. She had her whole life planned out. Medical school, residency, specializing in pediatrics. She wanted to work with children, she said, because they deserved someone who would fight for them. Sarah was different. She was quieter, more cynical, less sure of her path. She wrote for the student newspaper, covering campus events and local politics. But she was not sure if journalism was really what she wanted. She was not sure of anything, really, except that Emma was her best friend, and that was enough. And then, Emma started dating Tyler Grant. Tyler was a senior, a business major with a trust fund, and a smile that made everyone trust him. He was charming, confident, the kind of guy who could walk into any room and own it. He and Emma met at a party, and within 2 weeks, they were inseparable. Sarah had been happy for her at first. Emma deserved someone who made her smile like that. But something was off. Sarah noticed it slowly, little things that did not quite add up. Emma started canceling plans. She stopped going to the free clinic. She stopped studying with Sarah. She was always with Tyler. And when she was not with him, she was texting him, calling him, waiting for him to call her back. Sarah tried to talk to her about it once. They were in the apartment, Emma sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. "Are you okay?" Emma looked up, surprised. "Yeah, why?" "You just seem different lately, like you were always with Tyler." Emma smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I am fine. I'm happy," but she was not. Sarah could see it. The way Emma flinched sometimes when her phone buzzed. The way she wore long sleeves even when it was warm. The way she started lying about where she was going. Sarah should have pushed harder. She should have asked more questions. She should have done something. But she did not. The night Emma died, Sarah was at the library. She had a paper due the next morning, and she had procrastinated until the last minute. She stayed until they kicked her out at midnight, then walked back to the apartment. It was October, cold and windy, the kind of night that made you walk fast and keep your head down. When she got to the apartment, the door was unlocked. That was the first strange thing. Emma always locked the door. Always. Sarah pushed it open, calling out, "Em, you home?" No answer. The living room was dark. Sarah flipped on the light. Everything looked normal. Couch, coffee table, the posters they had hung. She walked to Emma's bedroom, knocked on the door. "Emma? Emma." Still no answer. She opened the door. Emma was lying on the floor, her body twisted at an odd angle, her eyes open and staring at nothing. There was blood, so much blood. It pooled around her head, soaked into the carpet, splattered on the walls. Sarah screamed. She ran to Emma, dropped to her knees, tried to find a pulse, but her hands were shaking too badly. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, her voice breaking as she tried to explain what she was seeing. The operator kept asking questions. Was she breathing? Was there a weapon? Where was the blood coming from? Sarah could not answer. She could not think. She could only stare at Emma, at her best friend, at the person who was supposed to go to medical school and save children and live a long, happy life. The police arrived within minutes. Paramedics, detectives, they pulled Sarah out of the room. Wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, asked her questions she could not answer. She was in shock, they said. She needed to go to the hospital, they said. But she did not want to leave. She wanted to stay with Emma. She wanted to fix this, to rewind time, to do something, anything. They took her anyway. At the hospital, they cleaned the blood off her hands and clothes. They gave her something to calm her down, but it did not work. Nothing worked. She sat in the waiting room, staring at the white walls, replaying the image of Emma's body over and over in her mind. The detective came to talk to her. His name was Detective Raymond Cole, a man in his 40s with graying hair and tired eyes. He sat across from her, his notebook open on his lap. "I am sorry for your loss," he said. "I know this is hard, but I need to ask you some questions." Sarah nodded, but she could not speak. "When did you last see Emma?" "This morning, before class." "Did she seem upset? Scared?" Sarah thought about it. "No, she seemed normal." "Did she mention anyone who might want to hurt her?" Sarah hesitated. She thought about Tyler, about the way Emma had been acting, but the bruises she had seen on Emma's arms that Emma had brushed off as clumsiness. Her boyfriend, Sarah said finally. "Tyler Grant. I think he was hurting her." Detective Cole wrote that down. "Do you know where he is now?" He asked more questions about Emma's routine, her friends, her classes. Sarah answered as best she could, but her mind kept drifting back to the blood, to the way Emma's eyes had been open, staring at nothing. She called her mother, but her mother did not answer. She called Marcus, but he did not answer either. She sat in that waiting room for hours, until a nurse finally told her she could go home. But she did not have a home anymore. Not really. The apartment was a crime scene. Emma was gone. Everything was gone. No. She ended up at Marcus's place, a small studio apartment across town. He let her stay on his couch, made her tea, tried to get her to eat. She could not. She could not do anything except stare at the wall and try to understand how this had happened. The next day, the police arrested Tyler Grant. They found him at his parents' house, 20 miles outside of town. He denied everything. Said he had been home all night, that he loved Emma, that he would never hurt her. But the evidence said otherwise. His fingerprints were in the apartment. His DNA was under Emma's fingernails. There were texts on his phone, angry, threatening texts that Emma had never told Sarah about. Sarah thought that was the end of it. Tyler would go to prison. Justice would be served. Emma would be gone, but at least her killer would pay. But then, the investigation took a turn. Detective Cole came to see her again, this time at Marcus's apartment. He sat across from her at the small kitchen table, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said. Sarah's stomach dropped. "What is wrong? You have been looking into Emma's death, and some things are not adding up." "What do you mean?" "Your story? About being at the library? You checked the security footage? You left at 11:30, not midnight. I guess you had a 30-minute window." Sarah stared at him. "A window for what? To go to the apartment? To see Emma?" "I did not. I went straight home." Detective Cole leaned forward. "We also found your fingerprints on the murder weapon, kitchen knife from your apartment." "Of course my fingerprints are on it. I live there. I use the knives." He nodded slowly. "I understand that. But here's the thing. We also found texts between you and Emma. Arguments about Tyler." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "We were worried about her. I was trying to help her. Some of these texts, they are pretty angry. You told her she was making a mistake, that Tyler was dangerous, that she needed to leave him because he was dangerous. Look what he did to her." Detective Cole did not say anything for a moment. Then he pulled out a piece of paper, slid it across the table. It was a text from Sarah to Emma, sent 2 days before Emma died. "If you do not leave him, I will make you." Sarah stared at the text. She remembered sending it. She had been frustrated, scared, desperate to get Emma to see what was happening. But reading it now, out of context, it looked different. It looked like a threat. "I did not mean it like that," Sarah said. "I was just trying to help her." "I believe you," Detective Cole said. But the prosecutor might not see it that way, and that was how it started. The suspicion, the questions, the way people started looking at her differently. They arrested her 3 weeks later. The evidence, they said, was circumstantial but compelling. Her fingerprints on the weapon, the texts, the 30-minute window. The fact that she was the one who found the body. And then there was the testimony from Tyler's defense attorney, who painted a picture of Sarah as jealous, obsessed, angry that Emma was spending all her time with Tyler instead of her. It was insane. It was a nightmare. But it was happening. The trial began 2 months later. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, piece by piece. They brought in forensic experts who talked about blood spatter patterns and DNA evidence. They brought in Emma's friends who testified about the arguments between Sarah and Emma. They brought in the librarian, co-confirmed that Sarah had left at 11:30, not midnight. And then they brought in Tyler, sat in the witness stand looking broken, his eyes red from crying, talked about how much he loved Emma, how they had fought sometimes, but it was never serious. How he would never hurt her. Talked about Sarah, about how she'd been jealous of their relationship, about how she had sent him threatening messages telling him to stay away from Emma. Sarah wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and tell everyone that he was lying, that he was a murderer, that he had killed Emma and was now trying to frame her for it. But David told her to stay calm, to let him handle it. David did his best. He tore into Tyler on cross-examination, pointing out the inconsistencies in his story, the evidence that placed him at the apartment, the texts he had sent to Emma. But Tyler was good. He stayed calm, played the grieving boyfriend, and by the time he stepped down, Sarah could see that some of the jurors believed him. The defense rested after 2 weeks. David had done everything he could. He brought in experts who disputed the prosecution's timeline. He brought in friends who testified to Sarah's character. He brought in Emma's sister, Emily, who tearfully said that Sarah had loved Emma and would never hurt her. But it was not enough. Sarah could see it in the jurors' faces, the doubt, the suspicion, the way they looked at her like she was a monster. And now, here she was. 37 days later, waiting for a verdict that would decide the rest of her life. In the courthouse, paramedics were working on Sarah. Her pulse was weak, erratic. Her breathing was shallow. They put an oxygen mask on her face, started an IV, loaded her onto a stretcher. Judge Holloway stood at the bench, her face pale. What happened? Someone tell me what happened. David knelt beside Sarah, his hand on her shoulder. I do not know. She just collapsed. One of the paramedics looked up at the judge. She was in cardiac arrest. We need to get her to a hospital now. Go, Judge Holloway said. They wheeled Sarah out of the courtroom, through the hallways, out to the ambulance, waiting outside. The siren wailed as they sped toward the hospital, the paramedics working frantically to keep her alive. In the courtroom, chaos continued. The judge called for order, but no one was listening. Emma Chen was sobbing in her husband's arms. Linda Mitchell was being held back by Marcus, screaming Sarah's name. Porters were rushing out, already calling their editors, already writing the headlines. The foreman still held the piece of paper with the verdict on it. He stared at it, his hand shaking. He had been about to read it. He had been about to say the words that would decide Sarah Mitchell's fate. But now, those words did not matter, because Sarah Mitchell was dying. At the hospital, they rushed her into the emergency room. Doctors and nurses swarmed around her, shouting orders, hooking her up to machines. Her heart had stopped twice in the ambulance. It shocked her back both times, but she was fading fast. One of the doctors, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and steady hands, looked at the monitors and frowned. This is not just a heart attack. Something else is going on. Another doctor, older, gray-haired, leaned in to examine Sarah. Her pupils are dilated. Her breathing is depressed. This looks like poisoning. Poisoning from what? I do not know. Run a tox screen. Full panel now. They worked for hours, pumping her stomach, administering antidotes, trying everything they could to stabilize her. But whatever was in her system, it was strong, too strong. Sarah's mother arrived at the hospital, frantic, They would not let her into the room, so she stood outside, watching through the window, praying. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "She is going to be okay," he said. "She has to be." But Linda knew better. She could see it in the doctors' faces, the way they kept glancing at each other, the way they moved with increasing urgency. Her daughter was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Back at the courthouse, Detective Cole was pacing in the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear. He was talking to one of the detectives at the hospital, getting updates. "Poisoning," he said. "Are they sure?" "They are running tests now, but it looks that way." Detective Cole hung up and turned to his partner, Detective Lisa Moreno, a woman in her mid-30s with dark hair and sharp instincts. "If Sarah was poisoned, it was not an accident. Someone wanted her dead." Lisa nodded. "The question is who and when." They went back into the courtroom. Judge Holloway was still there, sitting at the bench, staring at nothing. The bailiff was standing nearby, looking shaken. The courtroom was empty now, except for a few stragglers. "Your Honor," Detective Cole said, "we need to treat this courtroom as a crime scene." Judge Holloway looked up at him, her face pale. "A crime scene?" "Why, we believe Sarah Mitchell was poisoned. If that is true, it happened here today." The judge stood slowly. "Do whatever you need to do." Detectives Cole and Moreno got to work. They cordoned off the courtroom, brought in a forensics team. They collected evidence. Sarah's water bottle, the papers on the defense table, the chair she had been sitting in. And then they started questioning everyone who had been in the courtroom. The bailiff, the court reporter, the jurors, the lawyers, families. David Rosen was devastated. "She was fine this morning," he said. "I talked to her before we came in. She was nervous, but she was fine." "Did she eat or drink anything?" Detective Cole asked. "It's just water." "She had a bottle of water. Where did it come from?" David frowned. "I do not know. It was on the table when we got here." Detective Cole and Lisa exchanged a glance. They bagged the water bottle, sent it to the lab for testing. They questioned the bailiff next. "Did you see anyone near the defense table before the trial started?" The bailiff thought about it. "No. Well, maybe. There were a lot of people coming in and out. Lawyers, clerks. I cannot say for sure." They questioned the jurors, but none of them had seen anything unusual. They questioned the families, but everyone had been sitting in the gallery, too far away to do anything. And then they questioned Tyler Grant. He'd been sitting in the back of the courtroom, surrounded by his parents and his attorney. When Detective Cole approached him, he looked surprised. "Me? Why would I want to hurt Sarah? You tell me," Detective Cole said. Tyler shook his head. "I did not do anything. I've been sitting here the whole time." "Did you see anyone near the defense table?" "No. I was not paying attention." Detective Cole did not believe him. There was something in Tyler's eyes, something cold and calculating. But he did not have any evidence. Not yet. At the hospital, Sarah's condition was deteriorating. The doctors had identified the poison. Cyanide. A lethal dose. It had been in her system for hours, slowly shutting down her organs. "There's nothing more we can do," one of the doctors said to Linda. "I am sorry." Linda collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Marcus stood beside her, his face blank with shock. A nurse came out a few minutes later. "She is awake. If you want to see her, you should go now." Linda and Marcus rushed into the room. Sarah was lying in the bed, pale and weak, barely conscious. Tubes and wires ran from her body to machines that beeped and hummed. "Mom," Sarah whispered. Linda took her hand, tears streaming down her face. "I am here, baby." Sarah tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Did they read it? The verdict?" Linda shook her head. "No, sweetheart. You collapsed before they could." Sarah closed her eyes. "I need to know. I need to know if they believed me." "Right. You are going to be fine," Linda said, even though she knew it was a lie. "We are going to get through this." But Sarah knew the truth. She could feel it. Her body was shutting down. She did not have much time. "Marcus," she whispered. "Come here." Marcus leaned in close, his face inches from hers. "Find out who did this," Sarah said. "Find out who killed Emma, and find out who killed me." Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I will, I promise." Sarah smiled. Her eyes closed. The machines started beeping faster, louder. And then they stopped. The doctors and nurses rushed in, tried to resuscitate her, but it was too late. Sarah Mitchell was gone. Linda screamed. Marcus held her as she collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. Nurse gently ushered them out of the room, giving them space to grieve. At the courthouse, Detective Cole got the call. Sarah Mitchell was dead. He hung up and turned to Lisa. "We need to find out who did this." They worked through the night, analyzing evidence, interviewing witnesses. The water bottle came back positive for cyanide. Someone had laced it, placed it on the defense table, and waited for Sarah to drink it. But who? They reviewed the security footage from the courthouse. Dozens of people had passed through the courtroom that morning. Lawyers, clerks, bailiffs, family members. Any one of them could have done it. And then Lisa noticed something. A figure in the background, moving quickly, placing something on the defense table. The footage was grainy, but she enhanced it, zoomed in. It was a woman, mid-20s, long dark hair. Wearing a coat and scarf that covered most of her face. "Do you recognize her?" Lisa asked. Detective Cole stared at the screen. "No, but we need to find out who she is." They ran the footage through facial recognition software, but it came back with no matches. Whoever she was not in the system. And then Marcus called. He'd been going through Sarah's things, trying to make sense of everything, and he had found something. A notebook, hidden in Sarah's bedroom at his apartment. "What is in it?" Detective Cole asked. "Notes," Marcus said, "about Emma's death." Sarah was investigating on her own. She did not trust the police. She thought someone else was involved. Someone else. Who? Marcus flipped through the pages. "There is a name here. Rebecca Chen." "Rebecca Chen? Emma's mother?" "Yes." Sarah wrote that Rebecca blamed her for Emma's death. That Rebecca had threatened her. That Rebecca had access to the courthouse because she had been attending the trial every day. Detective Cole felt his stomach drop. "We need to talk to Rebecca Chen." They went to the Chen household that night. Rebecca answered the door, her face hollow and exhausted. She had been crying. Her husband stood behind her, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Chen," Detective Cole said, "we need to ask you some questions." Rebecca nodded, stepping aside to let them in. They sat in the living room, the same room where Emma had grown up, where family photos lined the walls, where everything was a reminder of what they had lost. "Did you know Sarah Mitchell was poisoned?" Detective Cole asked. Rebecca's face crumpled. "I heard it is terrible." "Where were you this morning at the courthouse? Waiting for the verdict? You know that? Did you go near the defense table at any point?" Rebecca hesitated. "No. Why would I?" Detective Cole pulled out a photo. The image from the security footage, the woman with dark hair placing something on the table. "Do you know who this is?" Rebecca stared at the photo. Her face went pale. "That is not me." "Are you sure?" "Yes, that is not me." But Detective Cole was not convinced. He looked at Michael. "Mr. Chen, do you recognize this woman?" Michael studied the photo. His eyes widened. He looked at Rebecca, then back at the photo. "That is Emily." Emily, their daughter. The 16-year-old girl who had cried on the witness stand. Detective Cole felt his blood run cold. "Where is Emily now?" "She is upstairs," Rebecca said. "In her room. We need to talk to her." They went upstairs, knocked on Emily's door. No answer. Detective Cole opened the door. The room was empty. The window was open, curtains billowing in the breeze. "She is gone," Lisa said. They searched the house, the neighborhood, but Emily was nowhere to be found. She had run. Detective Cole called it in. An APB was issued. Emily Chen, 16 years old, wanted for questioning in the murder of Sarah Mitchell. They found her 2 days later. She was at a bus station, trying to buy a ticket to California. She did not resist when they arrested her. At the station, Emily sat across from Detective Cole and Lisa in the interrogation room. She looked small, fragile, her eyes red from crying. "Why did you do it, Emily?" Detective Cole asked gently. Emily did not answer at first. She stared at her hands, at the way they trembled in her lap. Finally, she spoke. "Because she killed my sister." "Sarah did not kill Emma." "We have evidence that Tyler did." Emily shook her head. "No, Tyler did not kill her. Sarah did." "Why do you think that?" "Because Emma told me, the night before she died. She called me crying, said she was scared. She said Sarah was acting strange, that Sarah had been following her, watching her. Emma said she was going to break off the friendship. And then she died. Detective Cole leaned forward. Emily, that does not mean Sarah killed her. Yes, it does. Emily's voice rose. She was jealous. She hated Tyler. She wanted Emma all to herself. And when Emma chose Tyler over her, she killed her. The evidence does not support that. I do not care about the evidence. Emily slammed her hand on the table. I know what happened, and I made sure she paid for it. By poisoning her? Emily nodded. I went to the courthouse early. I had a bottle of water with cyanide in it. I put it on the table where Sarah would sit, and I waited. How did you get the cyanide? I stole it from my dad's lab. He works at the university. He has all kinds of chemicals. Detective Cole sat back, trying to process what he was hearing. A 16-year-old girl had murdered someone in cold blood. She did not seem to regret it. Emily, Sarah did not kill your sister. Tyler did. We have his DNA under Emma's fingernails. We have texts where he threatened her. He is the killer. Emily stared at him, her face blank. No, you are wrong. We are not wrong. You killed an innocent woman. For the first time, Emily's face cracked. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I did not know, she whispered. I did not know. The trial for Emily Chen began 6 months later. She was charged as an adult, despite her age. The prosecution argued that her actions were premeditated, calculated, and she should be held fully responsible. The defense argued that she was a child, traumatized by her sister's death, manipulated by her own grief, and by Tyler's lies. They painted her as a victim, not a villain. The jury deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they found her guilty. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. At the sentencing, Rebecca Chen sat in the gallery, her face blank. She had lost both her daughters now, one to a murderer, one to her own misguided sense of justice. Marcus sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as they led Emily away. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he had made to her. He had found out who killed her. But it did not feel like justice. It just felt like more loss. Tyler Grant was convicted 3 months later in a separate trial. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict in Sarah's trial, the one that had never been read. Detective Cole had requested it from the court. He opened the sealed envelope, read the words written there. Not guilty. Sarah Mitchell had been innocent. The jury had believed her. She had been about to walk free. But she never got to hear those words. She died before the judge could speak. Detective Cole folded the paper and put it back in the envelope. He thought about Sarah, about Emma, about Emily, about how one person's death had cascaded into so many others. Justice, he thought, was supposed to make things right. But sometimes it just made things worse. He left the courthouse and went home. It was late. The city was quiet. He poured himself a drink, sat on his couch, and stared at the wall. He thought about the girl who had collapsed in court before the judge could speak. The girl who had died waiting for justice. The girl who would never know that she had one. Sarah Mitchell was buried next to Emma Chen. It was not planned. Their families had not coordinated it. But the cemetery was small, and there were not many plots available. So they lay side by side, best friends in life and in death. Linda Mitchell visited the grave every week. She brought flowers, talked to Sarah, told her about her day. Marcus came too, though less often. It was too hard for him. Seeing her name on that stone, Rebecca Chen came once. She stood between the two graves, looking at the names carved in marble. Emma Chen, Sarah Mitchell. 2 girls who should have had their whole lives ahead of them. She knelt down, placed flowers on both graves, and whispered an apology. To both of them, Emily Chen was in prison. She would be there for a long time. She spent her days in a cell, staring at the walls, replaying that moment over and over. The moment she placed the poisoned water bottle on the table, the moment she decided to become a killer, she thought about Sarah. About the trial, about the verdict that was never read. She wondered sometimes if Sarah had been innocent. She wondered if she had made the worst mistake of her life. But she would never know for sure. Because the truth, once buried, is hard to dig up again. And so the story ended. Not with justice, but with tragedy. Not with answers, but with questions. not with closure, but with loss. Because sometimes life does not give you a neat ending. Sometimes people die before they get to hear the words that would have saved them. Sometimes the people we love are taken from us, and all we are left with is grief and guilt and the echoes of what might have been. Sarah Mitchell collapsed in court before the judge could speak, and with her collapse, the truth collapsed too. But maybe, somewhere she knows. Maybe wherever she is, someone finally told her the words she never got to hear. Not guilty. Maybe that is enough. Or maybe it is not. Either way, she is gone. Nothing will bring her back.